You gave everything you had. You cared when nobody else seemed to care. You kept showing up again and again until one day you suddenly stopped. Not because you wanted to walk away, but because something deep inside you finally cracked. And now you're the person nobody can truly reach anymore. Let's talk about the signs that show an empath has crossed into a completely different phase of life. Number 1. You stop explaining yourself. There was once a time when you would open your heart completely, trying to help people understand how you felt. You would send long paragraphs, stay awake during late-night talks, and do anything possible just to feel heard. But now silence feels less exhausting. You realize that most people never really wanted to understand you. They only wanted you to stay easy and convenient for them. So you stopped wasting energy explaining yourself to people who were never listening in the first place. When someone asks if you're okay, you simply say you're fine. Even when your inner world feels like it's collapsing, the emotional weight of trying to make somebody care became too much for you to carry anymore. Number 2. Your phone stays quiet because you choose it that way. Remember when you used to check your phone every few minutes? When you answered messages instantly because you never wanted someone else to feel ignored the same way you once felt ignored? That version of you faded away. Now your phone sits untouched for hours or even days at a time. Notifications build up and you barely react to them. It's not because you are too busy. It's because you're tired of always being the one who reaches out first. And you notice something painful. The moment you stopped initiating conversations, most of them disappeared completely. That silence told you more than words ever could about where you actually stood in people's lives. Number 3. You became an expert at surface-level connection. You can smile, laugh, joke around, and look completely fine while revealing absolutely nothing real about yourself. It feels like there's an invisible wall around your inner world now. People believe they know you, but they only know the safe version you allow them to see. You've become skilled at changing the subject, asking questions back, and keeping everything casual. Because you've learned that vulnerability often becomes ammunition in the hands of the wrong people. The real you stays hidden now, protected from betrayal and disappointment. Number 4. You no longer feel guilty for putting yourself first. This one changes everything. Empaths grow up carrying guilt for almost everything. You felt guilty for saying no, for creating boundaries, for not sacrificing yourself for everyone else's happiness. But eventually something inside you changed. You started noticing that the people asking the most from you were usually the ones giving the least in return. You realized your exhaustion never mattered to them as long as you remained useful. So you stopped apologizing for protecting your peace. And when someone calls you selfish now, you no longer fall apart. You recognize it for what it really is: manipulation from people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. Number 5. You've stopped trying to rescue everyone. You used to believe in people's potential more than they believed in themselves. You thought if you loved someone enough, supported them enough, stayed patient long enough, they would eventually heal and change. You carried their struggles like they were your responsibility. But eventually life taught you something painful. You cannot save someone who refuses to save themselves. And that lesson cost you a lot emotionally. Now, when you see someone struggling, you still feel compassion, but you no longer feel responsible for fixing their life. You understand now that everybody has their own path to walk, and you are no longer willing to carry people who refuse to stand on their own feet. Number 6. Your energy became extremely selective. There was once a version of you that gave your energy freely to anyone who needed it. Friends, family, co-workers, strangers, it didn't matter. Your heart and your time were always available. But giving endlessly without receiving anything back drained you completely. Now you protect your energy like it's priceless, because it is. You've learned how to recognize emotional takers from far away. The people who only call when they need something. The ones who unload all their pain onto you without even asking if you have the emotional strength to handle it. You no longer entertain those connections. Your energy is now reserved only for the rare people who protect your heart the same way you once protected theirs. Number 7. You accepted that many relationships were one-sided. This realization hurts deeper than losing people. Looking back, you can finally see the pattern clearly. You were always the one checking in, making plans, remembering important dates, showing up when life became hard for others. And once you stopped doing those things, people slowly disappeared. Nobody fought for you the way you fought for them. Nobody noticed your absence the same way you would have noticed theirs. And while that truth hurts deeply, it also frees you. Because now you no longer pour your energy into relationships that only survived because of your effort alone. Number 8. You choose loneliness over fake connection. Most people are terrified of being alone, but you've learned something important. Being alone is far less painful than being surrounded by people who still make you feel invisible. You would rather sit quietly by yourself than force shallow conversations with people who never truly see you. Your tolerance for fake friendships has completely disappeared. You've experienced enough disappointment to understand that quality matters far more than quantity. An empty room feels more peaceful than a crowded room filled with people who only value you when you're performing for them emotionally. Number 9. You built walls that genuinely protect you. People always say sensitivity is a gift, but they rarely talk about the price that comes with it. You've walked into rooms and absorbed emotions that were never yours to carry. You've carried the pain of others while ignoring your own. You've been treated like an emotional dumping ground by people who never once stopped to ask if you were okay. So you built walls. Real ones. Not to shut the entire world out, but to keep yourself safe until someone proves they deserve access to your deeper self. And you no longer feel ashamed for having those walls. They are not cruelty. They are wisdom created through pain. Number 10. You stop searching for closure. You once needed answers for everything. Why did they leave? What did you do wrong? How could someone hurt you after everything you gave them? You replayed conversations endlessly in your mind. You analyzed every text message. You searched for the exact moment things started falling apart. But eventually, you learned something important. Closure is not always something another person gives you. Some people will never explain themselves because they don't even understand their own behavior. Others simply don't care enough to offer answers. So now you create your own closure. You decide when a chapter ends. You stop waiting for apologies that may never come and explanations that would never heal you anyway. Number 11. Your empathy finally comes with boundaries. A lot of people misunderstand this stage. Becoming distant doesn't mean you stopped caring. You still care deeply. You still notice when someone is hurting. The difference is that you no longer destroy yourself trying to save everybody else. You learned how to support someone without drowning in their pain. You learned how to listen without absorbing every emotion around you. Your empathy transformed from something people could easily exploit into something you now control wisely. You no longer give from an empty soul. You give only from what you can genuinely spare. Number 12. You realize not everyone deserves your story. There was a time when you shared everything openly. Your pain, your trauma, your healing, your struggles. You believed vulnerability would automatically create deep and meaningful connections. Sometimes it did, but many times it turned into gossip, judgment, or information people later used against you. So now you're more careful. Not everybody deserves access to your wounds. Not everybody has earned the right to hear your truth. You now share your story only with people who have proven they can handle your heart gently and respectfully. Number 13. You became comfortable being misunderstood. People who knew the old version of you often don't recognize who you've become. They call you distant, cold, different, or detached. And honestly, they're partly right. You did change. But what they call coldness is actually self-protection. What they see as distance is really wisdom and discernment. You stopped trying to explain your growth to people who benefited from the unhealthy version of you. Let them misunderstand you if they want. Their opinion no longer controls your peace. You finally accepted that some people will always label you negatively simply because you are no longer easy to manipulate. Number 14. You understand that healing is not a straight line, and that's okay. Some days you feel strong, peaceful, healed, and emotionally balanced. Other days, the old version of you comes rushing back, and suddenly you feel everything all over again. But you stopped punishing yourself for those moments. Becoming emotionally guarded after repeated pain is not weakness. It's part of the healing process. You're not broken because you're cautious now. You're not heartless because you're more careful with who enters your life. You're someone who once loved with everything you had and got hurt deeply because of it. And now you're learning how to love in a healthier way, beginning with yourself first. Number 15. You know you can never go back, and you don't want to. The old version of you no longer exists, and maybe that's actually a good thing. That old version kept giving until there was nothing left. This new version understands their value. The old version accepted crumbs and called it love. This new version walks away from disrespect without hesitation. You can't unlearn what life taught you. You can't pretend you haven't seen the truth about people. And while a part of you sometimes misses the innocence of believing everybody had pure intentions, you would never trade your awareness for that innocence again. Your pain changed you, but it also made you stronger. There is power in surviving what once almost destroyed you. Here's the truth that many people never talk about. Sometimes the kindest souls become the most guarded people in the room, not because they stopped caring about others, but because they finally started caring about themselves too. And that changes everything. If this connected with you, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share which sign affected you the most. Was it number 7? Number 12? I truly want to hear your experience. And if this message helped you in any way, send it to someone who needs the reminder that protecting your peace is not selfish. Sometimes it's necessary for survival. A lot of people will never understand what happens to an empath after years of disappointment. They think you suddenly changed overnight. They think you became distant for no reason. But they never saw the countless nights you stayed awake overthinking conversations. They never saw how many times you forgave behavior that should have been the final straw. They never saw how often you chose other people's comfort over your own emotional health. The truth is, an empath rarely changes all at once. It happens slowly, quietly, piece by piece. Every betrayal adds another layer of caution. Every disappointment teaches another painful lesson. And eventually, the person who once gave endless chances becomes someone who protects their energy at all costs. What hurts the most is realizing how many people only loved the version of you that had no boundaries. They loved the version of you that always answered immediately, the version that tolerated disrespect just to keep the peace, the version that constantly gave second chances even when nothing changed. But the moment you started protecting yourself, suddenly you became difficult. Suddenly you were too distant, too unavailable, too guarded. And that says more about them than it does about you. An empath reaches a point where exhaustion becomes stronger than attachment. That is the moment everything changes. You stop chasing people who clearly don't value you. You stop begging for honesty from people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. And for the first time in your life, you start asking yourself one important question. Who takes care of me when I spend all my time taking care of everyone else? That question changes your entire perspective. Because for so long you convinced yourself that your value came from how much you could give. You believed love had to be earned through sacrifice. You thought being needed was the same thing as being loved. But they are not the same at all. Being needed often means people only appreciate what you do for them. Real love appreciates who you are, even when you have nothing left to give. That realization can feel heartbreaking at first. You begin replaying relationships in your mind, and suddenly the imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. You remember all the times you listened to someone cry for hours while nobody noticed when you were falling apart. You remember how quickly people disappeared once you stopped being useful to them emotionally. You remember carrying friendships, relationships, and family connections almost entirely by yourself. And eventually something inside you says, enough. Not out of anger, not out of bitterness, but out of survival. People often think guarded individuals are cruel, but many guarded people were simply too kind for too long. They know what it feels like to be emotionally drained. They know what it feels like to give everything to people who only took more. And after enough pain, self-protection stops feeling selfish. It starts feeling necessary. The hardest part for many empaths is learning that not everyone deserves unlimited access to them. You used to think love meant always being available, always understanding, always forgiving. But maturity teaches you that access to your energy should be earned, not automatically given away. Some people enter your life only to consume your peace. Some people are attracted to your kindness because they know you struggle to say no. And once you recognize those patterns, you can never fully unsee them. That's why your circle became smaller, not because you hate people, but because peace became more important than popularity. Drama no longer excites you. Chaos no longer feels normal. You've spent too many years emotionally cleaning up messes that were never yours to begin with. Now you crave calmness, honesty, consistency. You value people who communicate clearly instead of creating confusion. You value people who respect your boundaries instead of punishing you for having them. And the strange thing is, the more you heal, the less tolerance you have for emotionally unhealthy behavior. Things you once ignored now stand out immediately. Half-hearted effort, manipulation disguised as love, one-sided relationships, emotional immaturity. You notice it quickly because you've already lived through the damage it causes. Your awareness becomes sharper after pain. Sometimes this new version of yourself feels lonely. There are moments where you miss the softer version of you who trusted easily and loved without fear. But deep down you also know that version of you was constantly suffering, constantly overextending, constantly hoping people would eventually give back the same love you gave them. And many never did. So now you move differently. You observe more than you speak. You trust actions more than words. You pay attention to consistency instead of empty promises. You stop ignoring red flags simply because you see potential in someone. You realize potential means nothing without effort and accountability. And that understanding protects you from repeating old cycles. An empath who has been hurt enough becomes incredibly careful about where they place their heart. Not because they stopped believing in love or connection, but because they finally understand how damaging the wrong people can be. They understand that some individuals will happily drain your spirit while calling it love. They understand that being emotionally available without boundaries attracts people who only know how to take. So now you choose differently. You choose people who bring peace instead of confusion. You choose relationships where effort goes both ways. You choose environments where you don't have to constantly defend your feelings or explain your worth. And most importantly, you choose yourself even when other people dislike it. That is the part many people struggle to accept. The healed empath is no longer easy to control. Guilt no longer works the same way it used to. Manipulation becomes easier to recognize. Emotional games become exhausting instead of exciting. You stop romanticizing suffering. You stop confusing pain with passion. And suddenly, the people who benefited from your emotional exhaustion feel uncomfortable around the healthier version of you. But that discomfort is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is protecting the peace you fought so hard to rebuild. And yes, there will still be moments where old wounds reopen. There will still be days where you question yourself. Healing does not erase sensitivity. You still feel deeply. You still care deeply. But now your kindness includes yourself too. That is the difference. Before, your compassion had no limits, and it nearly destroyed you. Now, your compassion has wisdom attached to it. You finally understand that boundaries are not walls meant to punish others. They are doors that teach people how to treat you. And the right people will never resent you for having them. In fact, the right people will respect your honesty, your limits, and your need for peace. Healthy people do not punish others for self-respect. At the end of the day, becoming guarded was never your goal. You didn't wake up one morning wanting to disconnect from the world. Life pushed you into survival mode after too many experiences taught you that your softness was being mishandled. But even now, beneath the caution and boundaries, your heart still exists. Your empathy still exists. You simply learned that your kindness should no longer come at the cost of your own mental and emotional well-being. And maybe that is the most powerful lesson of all. Because the strongest empaths are not the ones who sacrifice themselves endlessly for everybody else. The strongest empaths are the ones who finally learn how to care deeply without abandoning themselves in the process.